let's go into business. Today, we are starting with the implementation phase. Okay, this is already step 4. We have already set up our gender equality plan, so it's time for putting actions in motion here. So remember, when we talked about step 3, the last of the actions in this line, you remember that we were setting all the different steps within step 3, and the last one was to get your gender equality plan approved. Okay, so now we have just approved our plan, and normally it is the university board that is responsible for this, for taking the last or final decision on this regard. And once we have approved the gender equality plan, we will need to set up the implementing structure. Okay, and very commonly this is not only responsibility of one unit or of specific vice rectorates, but also of deans and of directors of departments, heads of departments, and so on. So we need to think of a whole structure as inclusive as we can. Okay, so what are the main elements for implementing our GEP? Okay, so all the components needed for a successful and an effective implementation should be already included and detailed in our gender equality plan. So normally the plan will have a structure similar as this one. Okay, this is an example, but it includes everything that we need to get into the gender equality plan. And this is what will draw our road for implementation. So first, we will have for each thematic area, its intervention area. Remember that we had these 3 main domains, but then we can break that down into different intervention areas, as we were talking last week. Okay, so for each one, we will have to detail in the gender equality plan all of these aspects. Okay, we first need to describe the problem, the main problems, the issues that we have identified in our gender analysis, and we need to put it here again, because this will help to avoid this evaporation that we were talking about last week. So if we place it here, we make sure that this is the problem we have identified, this is how we are going to tackle it, okay, and we avoid this evaporation here. Then we need to set up our goals, our priorities, our objectives for that, to tackle those problems, okay? So they should specify what we want to achieve here, and they should clearly define the positive outcomes that we want to reach, okay? Then here we put our measures, our planned actions, okay? So we describe the measures of our gender equality plan according to a defined timeline, as we said last week as well, okay? And remember all the examples of measures that we gave you the link to all these examples that the GER tool offers, so you can get some inspiration there. And remember what we stressed out about the importance of alternating these short-term and these soft measures with more structural and mid-term and long-term ones, okay? And also about the importance of including diagnosis activities and actions, okay? Like periodic data collection, for example, because it has been proven that when we have these actions in motion, it is a key component for GEP implementation, okay? Which is what we are talking about now, implementation. So this is key aspect, because it will allow to measure change over time and to make aspects like gender bias and inequalities more visible over time and in the longer term, okay? Then we need to set up responsibilities here, very important, because this is what will define the implementation structure. So who is responsible for what and when? Okay, remember we talk about that when setting up the GEP. Okay, so we need to put here gender equality boards at universities, also human resources, communication personnel, remember your map of actors here, okay? Sometimes it's directly the rector or vice rectors, but some of the times it will be deans, head of departments, specific units, professors, and so on, right? But however, of course, the main responsibility to follow up the implementation of the plan will be the gender equality unit, okay? Or the specific structure. So we have a gender equality officer or a specific gender equality mechanism at our institution. But still, we need to set up responsibilities because this is also important for institutionalization, okay? Then we need to set, as we said, the time frame, which is very relevant for monitoring and evaluation purposes, as we will see now. Then targets, we need to formulate specific targets if we want to set up them, like values for the representation we want to reach of female researchers in different spaces, okay, and also target groups here. Then we need to set up indicators. We will refer to them later when we talk about step 5. And of course, resources. Remember what we said last week. We take into account all type of resources here, and also we need to ensure that there are some specific certain measures that will need to come with their own funding line, okay? And also we need to build on existing resources here. And last, we talk about the status, if it's already implemented or not, if it's postponed and why, and so on, to do a proper follow-up and monitoring of the implementation of the GEP, right? So this is like our implementation map here. What are the key aspects in this step? Okay, I would like to recommend at this point one article that one participant, Rachel, was sharing last week in the chat. You also have the reference at the end of the document, but we will send the PDF again because I think I missed attaching the PDF. So I will send it because it is about implementation, and it's really interesting. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. Okay, it will be sent by email this week. So key aspects for implementation. First, again, remember context matters. Okay, and implementation also have a strong contextual character, and this is where we will realize that if we have made copy-paste from actions from different gender equality plans, this is the step when we will realize that probably they won't be totally working for us, okay? Because similar actions can take very different meanings and produce very different results depending on context, okay? So take that in mind. Then we need to embed and institutionalize as many measures as possible. We also talked about that. This is crucial to ensure sustainability. We need to organize regular meetings first with the team responsible for the implementation of the gender equality plan, or what we will call like the core team responsible for the general follow-up, okay, or the support structure that we have created for implementing the agenda, okay. And then we also need to organize regular meetings with senior management and leadership. We need to permanently ensure their engagement and their commitment. So this is an ongoing activity. And also with other key actors, again, remember our key actors map, like human resources, and depending on the actions and on the phase, it will be different ones. So we need to permanently plan meetings with these co-workers and so on. This is what will help create first ownership of the gender equality plan, and what will motivate people to properly implement the plan, okay, and strengthen its potential, okay. Then there are two principles here from this set of principles that we saw that we should be articulating our process. There are two two principles here that are very important at this step. The first one is visibility. So we need to give visibility to our gender equality plan. We need to inform the institution about its existence. We need to inform about the different steps, about achievement made, about the implementation paths, and anything that we want to stress out depending on the step, okay? We need to give visibility to the time frame and so on. And the second one is flexibility. We need to be aware that implementation will need to be adapted to any changes, as we were saying, a COVID-19 crisis, a change of rectoral team, whatever. So we need to be flexible at this time, okay? The gender equality plan is nothing static, it's nothing immutable, okay? So we need to be aware of these circumstances that will require modification or amendments of the gender equality plan. So we need to make all this adaptation along the way. It's not that we do a gender equality plan, oh, how nice it looks, we leave it there, that's it. No, it needs to be constantly fitted and adapted, okay? Depending on our context. And then we need to identify and to manage resistances, which is, of course, a key point of any step, but also some of them, they will be raised here during the implementation. So be prepared to face obstacles when implementing, especially some key measures, like positive action measures, because this is what will happen, and we need to be prepared and to take action upon them, okay? And there has been many cases of unproblematic policy adoption, so we have no problems for approving the GEP, sometimes because you know, it's set by law, we're binded by that. So yeah, no problem, of course, we will have a gender equality plan, unproblematic adoption, but then we have like very little progress and very few tangible progress and results from its implementation. So here resistance is a primary factor explaining this lack of success, okay?